Welcome back to Two Who's Review. I'm Alex,
I'm Fitz.
and we are once again back between seasons, having reviewed, oh god, 80 episodes of Doctor Who by this point? More,
Isn't
maybe?
it? No, I think there's 92 at this
We've done
point.
92 episodes, but I don't know if we've done that many reviews. We've done 85 reviews for Doctor Who
Oh,
episodes.
true.
So we've watched 85 episodes of Doctor Who, and we're once again back to say, hey, we can do this as well. It looks fucking easy. So we are back with Two Who's Produce Season 3.
Season 3.
That's right.
Nice sync.
The Phoebe Waller-Bridge. It was synced for you. It was not synced for me.
Oh, okay. Oh dear, that's gonna be fun to edit.
Again, we are back with Phoebe Waller-Bridge, her third full season as the Doctor. In terms of where we last left off, it's kind of irrelevant. I think the end of the last season, it didn't leave many huge plot threads open. There is still a minor character who was a previous companion called Trax, who is an alien time traveler who is knocking about on a planet called Astropolis.
Yeah.
They're still in the mix, and we may or may not include them, but our previous two companions are no longer on board the TARDIS. One went home, and the other got wiped from the timeline.
Yay, only the fun stuff here.
And that is where we left off in the Christmas special. That is literally the last thing that's happened. And now we will see how it all gets... Is that trauma going to come up? Is it going to feed into the Doctor's dynamic with her next companions? Let's find out.
Oh boy. There's definitely going to be some trauma, I think, a little bit. So
before we jump into this, I assume we're rocking with another 10-episode season, like we have in the past.
Yes.
As per tradition, our previous podcast guests who have popped on for an episode or two have each contributed a story to this season. So Sam has contributed an episode, and Hadley has contributed an episode. That leaves 8 episodes up for grabs, and if I'm to understand it, Fitz, you've already come up with concepts for 7 of them.
I'm gonna count that. Dude,
because we're going back and forth on who does the season-long story. Fitz did the first season one, I did the second season one, so it's Fitz's turn, and he's had a lot of time to think about it. We've had a long gap between recordings.
I've got 6 episodes here. 2 of the other ones are Hadley and Sam's. I left one because I thought you were writing an individual episode, but we'll deal with that. And the others, I think actually the only other ones are the only other 2 are the 2-part finale. Fucking hell. Actually, no, not even that.
Yeah. That's great. So,
sorry, no, not even that. I've got an idea, not a full synopsis, but a chunky, slightly chunky paragraph here for even the part 2 finale. So we'll deal with that.
Sure. So it's going to be a slightly different structure from the previous discussions we've had, where I think pretty much across the board, except for Sam and Hadley, who've come forward with full-fledged 3-act descriptions and synopses, we've basically got a whole bunch of loose ideas that we're just going to chuck at the board. Hopefully, it all fits. If not, we can work something out in the moment. We are both educated. One of us followed through on that education and finished it, but the point remains. We're both writers who've written a lot. We should be able to figure something out.
Yes, we will use all of our considerable skills.
But I think the best place to start is with the season premiere. So, we have a Doctor alone in the TARDIS, having just been through some pretty heavy shit. And I assume you have a certain idea as to where we pick up. I hope you have at least an episode 1 and companion introduction kind of in mind.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so let's take it away.
Before we do that, do you want me to go through some ideas of who these companions are, or do you want me to just sort of let that arise, sort of? Because I've got that written here.
I think it's up to you. If you want to describe the companions first and then jump into their introduction story, or if you want to summarize their introduction story and in the process, work out who they are, or like introduce who they are in the process.
Actually, the
Whatever
introductions.
works.
I've got a few notes here, but the introduction, like the actual brief descriptions of them, are pretty brief. They're basically Michelle and Gemma. They're a mother and daughter. Michelle is a recent graduate of university. She was studying archaeology. She's now doing research at a museum. Not exactly sure what the research is. Something to do with ancient history. And the museum is curated by her mother, whose specialty is modern history. And I kind of like that because we can have some fun, interesting, I think, dynamics between different historical perspectives and interests. And it could also help with the issue of needing to over-explain how the timeline works, as in, like, a lot of the times the Doctor will have to say, hey, don't fuck around in the past, because it might do something in the future. But Michelle and Gemma will have a bit of a better understanding of that, because they're both invested in history.
Also,
and we can also play
just real
around
quick,
with that a
sorry.
little bit.
Real quick, so
go
Michelle
ahead.
is the mother and Gemma is the daughter?
No, other way around.
Okay, so...
Michelle's the daughter, Gemma's the mother.
Okay, great.
And we can, with the whole timeline thing, we can play around with it, and Hadley's already sort of done some interesting stuff with it, with these characters' understanding of the timeline. So we'll get into that. So those are the two companions. I actually want to start by doing something kind of fun before we get to the first episode. I want to talk about the main villain of this season.
Indeed.
It's the Valyard. I haven't. I know what I want them to do and why they're doing it. I can get into that a bit later because I'm not exactly sure when I'm going to reveal all of that. But they're back. For those who may not be in the know, they're a pre-established villain, basically like a dark version of the Doctor. I'm almost certain they were not in any other media before Trial of a Time Lord. They exist between the Doctor's 12th and apparently final regeneration, so just basically evil Doctor, essentially. And not even in a master kind of way, but like the Doctor, but evil. Here's the fun part. I'd really like to take you through some potential casting I have for this character, and I think you're going to be intrigued. That's a word. So here's what I've got so far.
Sure.
We've got...
Now, real quick, just to be clear, has the Valyard regenerated since Trial of a Time Lord, or are we doing a Michael Gough, Neil Patrick Harris situation?
No, regenerated, I think, yeah.
Regenerated, got it. Right.
Yeah.
So,
definitely.
Is on the short list for the Valyard?
Yeah, okay. The short list. Dawn French, Jimmy Carr, Connor Swindles, and Rebecca Front.
Okay. Rebecca Front is from The Thick of It?
Yes, as Nicola Murray. Mm-hmm. And she had that one role in the Zygon episodes.
Rebecca Front was in the Zygon episodes?
I thought she was. Didn't she play like a general?
Zygon Invasion, yeah. It's listed here, God. You know what? You know why I don't remember her in that story? Because that wasn't the Peter Capaldi War Room speech scene. So that's the scene I've watched over and over and over again. So.
Yeah, fair enough. Yes, Connor Swindles
Rebecca Front,
is
Dawn French, who was the Vicar of Dibley.
Yep.
Who's the other one?
Connor Swindles is in Sex Education. He plays I can't believe his name. I'm gonna fucking kick myself. Red-haired bisexual dude who's in love with Shruti Gartler's character.
Oh, that guy.
And I can't 100% say why I would consider him, but there's just something about him where...
Adam Groff is the name of his character.
Yes, thank you. There's just something about him where he can be serious, but almost funny, but still kind of quite threatening in a way.
Yeah.
His character has quite a lot of dimension to it in Sex Education, and I think there's something there. And this one actually might be the most wild card. Jimmy Carr.
Yeah, right off the bat, no. I
I
don't think he
just
even
thought,
does he even have acting like experience? Isn't he just a comedian? Like comedians have obviously been on Doctor Who before, but they haven't had like massive roles like this.
yeah, I mean, he's hosted a couple of things, doing basically he's just his comedian self.
See,
I think for me it was my wild card choice because I'm like, oh, we've had instances where comedic actors play serious characters and they've worked.
Here's the thing.
Right?
I'll give you, okay. Here's the thing. I'll give Jimmy Carr as like a one-off villain in one of these episodes as like here's this season's celebrity pick, basically.
Yeah, that could work.
I don't think I see him as an overarching villain who's meant to be taken truly seriously. Because
Yeah, I don't think
I don't even think
he doesn't
his
have the
face
weight
should
to
be
carry.
that. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He
As
hasn't
much as
got
I
the
like Jimmy
gravitas.
Carr, I don't think it's as much as I love Jimmy Carr. He's not the right pick for the Valiant. I
Yeah,
like
that's fine.
Connor Swindles in that role. I
I do
really like that
too.
pick.
I'm happy to go with that. I am just sort of curious. What do you think about Dawn French or Rebecca Front? Because I think I actually thought once of pitching Dawn French for a new Doctor because it's similar logic to Jimmy Carr in that she's used to playing comedic roles, but I know, like I've seen in The Vicar of Dibley, she is very good at being serious, and I think she's got that kind of mix of whimsy and drama for a Doctor, but maybe for the Valiant,
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe she's not quite villainous enough for that, or...
I'm gonna tell you why I'm gonna go with Connor Swindles over Dawn French and Rebecca Front for the moment.
Sure. Yeah, go ahead.
I have a fan cast for the Master who I want to use at a certain point in one of these, and it is also a woman. And so, if we also cast a woman as the Valiant, I worry that the characterizations of both the characters would be a little too similar. If we go different in casting, we can go different in characterization.
Yep, sure. No, I think that makes sense. Yeah, look, I'm happy with Connor Swindles. I think that'll work. I'm happy to lock that in.
Yeah, awesome. And also, it means that down the line, if we want to do hey, let's write an anniversary special kind of thing, it gives us the brilliant option of reuniting Shooty Gutler and Connor Swindles as hero and villain once again.
Yeah, that'd be fun. Yeah, that'd be really interesting. Cool, Connor Swindles. Yeah, let's lock that in.
Do you have any ideas in mind for casting of the companions, or no?
No, not at this point. I got, as you can tell, a bit overexcited with these wacky ideas for the Valiant. I'm like, God, Cuff's gonna shit bricks when he hears this. Anyway, do you have any ideas on who could play these companions? I'm all ears.
Tell you what, I will have a think on it while we go through the discussion, because I don't think I know these two enough yet to have in mind.
Yeah, that's completely
play
fair.
them super well.
Yeah.
So as we go through, I'll let you know if anyone jumps out at me as a good idea.
And actually, that reminds me. I will say, with these episodes, I fear like the things that I've come up with, then a little bit light on character work especially for the companions. They're more sort of thematically, for want of a better term, dense. And I think working more on character is something we may want to focus on because these are fairly concept heavy stories. Anyway, we'll get to all of that. But anyway, the first episode. So I've written all of these episodes down, so I'm just going to sort of ramble through them if that's okay. Not I mean like one at a time. I mean, okay, yeah. So introduction episode. The Doctor meets their new companions. Maybe they make a stop on Earth at the museum that Michelle and Gemma work at. Maybe the Doctor comes to simply visit the museum to see a famous archaeological find. It could be the Rosetta Stone or maybe something original. Michelle, who loves ancient history, notices small inconsistencies that make her believe it's a fake. However, no one believes her until the Doctor arrives. The Doctor recognizes that it's a fake too, but also recognizes there's something more sinister going on with it. And that's all I've got for the introduction episode.
Okay, so some kind of booby-trapped alien, like, fake artifact kind of thing.
Yeah. And I think it could be interesting because the audience, I think, will want to believe Michelle, right? Because, she's our companion and, we're rooting for her. But then there's an interesting thing. It's like, oh, so wait, you're saying that this very famous artifact that's been looked over by all these accredited archaeological institutions, they've got it wrong somehow, but then it turns out they have, and, there's something, I don't know, interesting there about that, I think.
Yeah.
Do you think making it the Rosetta Stone would work, or do you think we should come up with something?
I think we should make it a in-universe artifact and not a real-world thing.
Sure. Yeah. All right, that's cool.
Maybe some kind of like Celtic.
Yeah, that's actually interesting because I don't think Celtic, even like Celtic mythology and stuff, isn't looked at with Doctor Who too commonly, so that could be interesting. There's what's his name? There's a creature that I know of in Celtic mythology. I think it's called Baelor, and he is like this sort of ogre type who has sort of I think it's a metal eye. And like Medusa, he can turn people into stone by looking at them, I'm pretty sure. So maybe it could be that. It could be like this small metal-looking eye that was dug up, and everyone thinks, oh, this is the real deal, but it turns out that it's not. Okay, no, it's not. It doesn't turn them into stone. It's poisonous, and malignant, and it, I think it just poisons and sort of destroys people when he looks at them. So that actually is also quite interesting. I mean, maybe actually, you know what? Maybe that's the title, The Eye of Baelor.
Sure. Yeah, let's go with that. How do you spell that?
Sorry.
I've got the EYE part.
Balor.
That's simple. Got it.
Cool.
And what's this artifact doing again to people? Is it just like?
Well, originally, like I said, I just thought of it being, apparently a fake. But yes, I think having some sort of impact. So maybe, maybe it could be causing people to become unnecessarily like angry with each other. Although, have we done an idea like that before? Because I feel like we have
done exactly this story in our first. This was how we introduced the Grants in their first.
Oh, that's right.
This is a pretty much exact retread of the previous companion introduction episode. And we got to be careful because people will pick up on that.
It was just such a great idea, Cuff. I mean, I don't know why we're abandoning it. I mean,
how about this? Maybe there's like I've got a better idea, or not necessarily a better idea, but a different idea.
But a different one, yeah.
Yeah. What if this thing is like, it's obviously some kind of a trap. What if like the artifact in question is actually a seal that was placed on some structure by the ancient peoples or whatever, and when it is properly translated, as the people in the museum do, it opens up this thing, and then like some aliens start to come through.
Like a dimensional rift of some kind.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. And sorry, just say again. Did you say like once if it's got like an inscription on it? Did you say or
Yeah, it's got some kind of like ancient writing on it, and once it is translated and read aloud.
Cool. Yeah, that could work because I think because Baelor is meant to be like this sort of ogreish creature, so maybe the eye can actually be quite big, like it's the size of a snow globe or something, and it's got this writing on it. Yeah, no, that
does it release cool. Baelor itself, or is there something else?
Ooh, good question. Maybe. Yeah, I think maybe releasing Baelor himself sounds kind of fun, and it sounds like a very Doctor Who thing, right? And it turns out that, he's like an interdimensional creature somewhere. I'd wondered I'd wondered whether we could somehow link it, even just not directly, but indirectly link it to the creepy circle in 73 Yards, because that sort of had to do with sort of fae and fairy magic. And they're sort of both are kind of linked with Celtic mythology. We don't have to, because
I think it's probably better to just kind of, if we do, it's only like implied.
Yes, yeah, no, that's fair. Yeah, I think actually in the spirit of the way 73 Yards is written, it's probably better that that mystery kind of remains sacred and unsolved. Yeah. But yes, I think opening up a sort of a rift to unleash Baelor onto the world sounds interesting. It could also give it a nice sort of ticking time bomb quality for the episode. Once the Doctor realizes, oh, this is what this is, and I think one of the things that should be established is how quickly do Michelle and Gemma believe the Doctor is who she says she is. Yeah. Right? Because that's a step that all companions have to take. It's like, oh, is this person really a time traveler, or are they just fucking with me,
Sure. Yeah.
And should we really heed their advice about an ogre that's coming into our dimension? I mean, sure, we've had 12 alien invasions over the last decade, but I'm pretty sure this time, it's got to be a lie.
Classic new companion stuff, yeah.
Magical demons and fairies aren't real, Doctor. What are you talking about?
That's only aliens are real.
Yeah. And this can't be an alien.
Can I ask a question about character? What's the dynamic between Gemma and Michelle like?
Yeah.
What's their relationship?
So, I think they're on pretty good terms. I think Michelle would have just been away for a while studying at university. Maybe she's come back to town and she knows her mother is the curator of this museum. There is a little bit of nepotism going on, but it's like, oh, okay, I've got a job, and that's really quite good. So there's a kind of not being in debt, but she is grateful for what Gemma is helping her with. There is a little bit of tension, not just because of their interest in different periods in history, although that's certainly true. But I picture Gemma as a bit more of a, if not conservative, then less politically mindful person than Michelle is. Maybe that's just a result of a generation gap, I don't know. But I think Hadley actually picked up on it, something similar a little bit as well, and we'll get to it. But for instance, episode 3, which I'll obviously get into more detail about, is when they go back to 1979 in Britain, right after Margaret Thatcher gets elected, and Gemma and Michelle have rather differing opinions on Thatcher, largely because Gemma, although I'm sure she would have been quite young, she lived through Thatcher's government, and she thinks, oh, well, was it really that bad? I mean, yeah, she made some dumb decisions, but we can't spend all of our lives hating her, right? And Michelle, understandably, is quite, offended, frankly, at that sort of attitude, so there's some tension there. But I don't know, there would have to be maybe a more specific cause that drives a rift between these two family members. I don't know exactly what that is yet, but the point is, I think there's some underlying tension, but even underneath that tension, there's obviously deep compassion and care between the two of them.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just looking up casting stuff. Go ahead.
Yeah, all good. I think in terms of which character would believe the Doctor first, it would be interesting if Gemma believed the Doctor first, or I really think it's got to be Michelle. I think she would just be a bit more open-minded, and like she's a slightly more head in the clouds person, I think, whereas Gemma is more down to earth. But one of the problems with that is she's kind of Gemma's so focused in the here and now and the running of the museum that she sometimes can't see past the front of her nose. So I think, there's also a tension there. But for that reason, I think Michelle, she's got to be the one who believes the Doctor first. I don't exactly know how that would manifest, but I think it's got to be her.
Yeah, that makes too much sense to me.
Yeah, I agree. Have you got any ideas for casting these characters, or you want to just?
I'm getting there. But I think we should take us into episode 2 for the moment.
Sure. Okay. So the Doctor takes Michelle and Gemma on a trip to the past as per their requests. They each want to visit different time periods, Michelle the ancient world, Gemma the modern world. First they go back in time to the ancient world to visit ancient Greece. Maybe at the end of this episode something happens that means the TARDIS can travel in time and space but only move forward in time in restrictive increments. So maybe first they can jump 200 years, then 500, then 1,000, and you see what I mean. Therefore, she must carefully calculate how to get Michelle and Gemma home. The Valeyard could be responsible for this malfunction, as they have business to attend to in the future, and they don't wish to be disturbed. Now, I had one idea, which I think I got rid of it. I think the idea was that in this ancient Greek location, they're like at an amphitheater, and they meet a couple of famous like ancient Greek playwrights, like Aristophanes and Sophocles and people like that.
Yeah.
I think I had this idea of wouldn't it be weird if like their creations came to life, and then I realized, Sophocles wrote Oedipus Rex, right? Maybe maybe that's a no-no zone for this sort of show.
What if instead they went back to see the first Greek Olympics?
Ooh, that's a good one. That's actually really interesting. I don't think an idea of that like that has ever really been done before, but that's actually really clever. Yeah, no, cool. That sounds like a good idea. I wonder. I thought of I wondered whether there could be any episode in this season where the threat could be purely terrestrial, but I think because it's Doctor Who, we'd be robbing the audience of a chance at sci-fi fun. I mean, making another gunfighters story, I don't know if that's exactly what an modern Doctor Who audience would be interested in. So, maybe we can do...
At the very least, certainly not this one.
No, because I think there's a lot of weird creatures that are involved in Greek myths, so maybe there's something we can do there.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's... I think there's a little bit of use of Greek myth in Doctor Who, but it's not... I don't know if it's explicit. Like, there's the Horns of Naimon, where the Naimon creature is clearly meant to represent the Minotaur. I think that whole story is actually about... it's a retelling of Perseus entering the Minotaur's labyrinth. And then there's an actual a Minotaur in the Mind Robber, of course, but I don't think it's been used heaps. But I think, there could be some...
This will be the classic, mythology thing is being explained via aliens. It's happened so often, but we're doing it with the Greeks now.
Yeah. I mean, we're kind of doing that a little bit with Baelor in the first one, but we can park that for now. I think it does.
True. I think it lends itself to this concept of these, museum and archaeologist people.
That's true.
These are stories we would tell with these characters.
Yes, I'd agree. And at the very least, for episode 2 specifically, it does make a lot of sense to have, the Hydra, actually being a giant mechanical creature that's been created by an alien species, and they keep building robot heads every time one gets cut off or something, which could actually be kind of fun.
Yeah, I mean, that'd be sweet, actually.
Yeah, but yes, okay. So they're in the first Olympics. Maybe, like, to start off, it could be just a fun, oh, we're gonna go on this fun holiday, Doctor. Hey, look, they're throwing the shot put, and wow, Doctor, look at how far that discus is being thrown, and oh, don't get hit by the javelin, and and sort of having fun, talking to all the different ancient Greek people who've come to watch and whatnot. But then something happens. Maybe they could be like a star athlete. Like, maybe not like specifically like a mythological character like Achilles or something, but some star athlete that either maybe falls ill or gets kidnapped, maybe. And either they think the Doctor did it, or the Doctor just wants to come in and help solve, this mystery. I think probably the second one better, because we've already got forgot whose episode it was. It was either Hadley's or Sam's, but somewhere where the Doctor gets blamed for the bad things happening. So
I think that's Sam's.
Yeah. Either way,
I have
got that
potential
idea,
casting I'd like to run by you now.
Oh, I'd love to know.
All right, so for Michelle, for our young ancient history buff, I want to throw out Georgie Henley, whose most famous role is as Lucy Pevensey in the Disney Narnia movies.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah. No, that sounds cool.
And as for her mother, Gemma, I'm going to suggest Lucy Punch, who I mainly know as Esme Squalor in the Netflix A Series of Unfortunate Events show.
That name rings a bell too. I know for a number of reasons you've watched way more of that show than I have. I'm just gonna look her up for a second.
Yeah.
What's her name again?
Lucy Punch.
Lucy Punch. Uh-huh. Right. Huh. Yeah, I don't think I've apparently she's in Hot Fuzz. I don't think I've seen her in much, but that's fine. I think that'll work. Yeah, cool.
Right, we've got casting.
And I'll trust your instincts on this at the very least. You've got a pretty good idea for things like this, so yeah, no, that sounds cool.
Sweet as. Okay. Okay, so we've got aliens bringing the Hydra to life.
Yeah, I think that sounds cool.
And at a certain point in this story, something happens to the TARDIS that means it can't go backwards in time.
Yes. I don't know exactly like what the cataclysmic event is, whether it's just the Doctor realizing, oh, what? Come on, TARDIS, why are you fucking around like this? Please don't do this. I've got to get these two home. Yeah. But something happens where, they realize they can't go backwards in time. Thank God they're in ancient Greece, but obviously that's quite frightening because if something happens and even if like if the Doctor makes one mistake and they overshoot their boundaries by like 100 years or whatever, they're a bit fucked, basically.
Yes.
Actually, I should mention. I should have done this earlier. I've written these stories like in a sequence, but they don't not all of them have to necessarily be in the order that I've written them. Right? They can be. We can swap them around as we see fit.
Yeah.
We
can toss in a Hadley story, a Sam story.
Yep. We'll have to talk about those stories actually later on for reasons. But anyway,
I think I don't know. See, the story that Hadley wrote feels like it should be early in the season, but it also kind of feels like we want to have firmly established some of the tensions that might be building up between the Doctor and the companions before we get there.
Yeah, well, and she's also mentioned that mentioned that the Valiard, like, we know who the Valiard is at this point, and I think
We can always
that's
tweak it
normally
to
like.
that's not the case.
I mean, yeah, that's true. I did come up with an idea. What if we do something really radical where we find out that the Valiard's behind it in episode 5 or something? But
I
maybe
mean,
that
that
may not
works.
work.
If you want to make, I think that could work.
You reckon?
Like, if the TARDIS being fucked isn't a result of the Hydra, but it's the Valiard's doing, and then they pop in halfway through the season to be like, this is why I've done this, Doctor, and this is why I'm right. Anyway, I've got something else planned. Good luck stopping me. Goodbye.
Yeah, that could work. Yeah, sure. I mean, we can do that. I do agree, though. In terms of developing the character dynamics, it might be better to put Hadley's episode a little later.
Yeah.
I think probably after the halfway point. It's just got that. It's just got that feeling to it, in terms of the characters. So, we can park it for now. We'll deal with it when we get to it. But yes, I think probably leaving it for a later season episode would be better.
I also want to note that I think that my episode that I've got in mind works best as the one directly before the 2-part finale.
Sure. Yep, that's fine. Excuse me. So, do you want to expand further on this ancient Greek idea with episode 2, or do you want to?
I think we're okay for now. We can come back to it if we need to add more flesh, but like we know roughly what it's going to be.
Episode 3, or as I like to call it, the Margaret Thatcher episode.
Here we go.
The Doctor tries to make a careful calculation by travelling to 1879 so Gemma can meet Gilbert and Sullivan at the premiere of Pirates of Penzance. Nothing, no self-insert stuff there at all, I'm sure. Unfortunately, she miscalculates and lands in London in 100 years later. And I didn't realise this, but I thought that's funny, because that's the exact opposite problem that takes them...
Tooth and Claw, yeah, it's the exact opposite. That's clever.
Yeah. And that was totally planned, and not just a weird little coinky-dink at all. Anyway, from here, they meet Margaret Thatcher, who has recently been elected Prime Minister of Great Britain.
Here's your Dawn French cameo.
That's... That's actually not a bad idea. Gemma is quite excited as she finds Thatcher fascinating, if immoral. Michelle hates the situation, as she's far more leftist and hates Thatcher and everything she stands for. There could be an alien threat that puts Margaret Thatcher's life at risk, and the Doctor has to save her, at the very least for the sake of the timeline, and also, I mean, I don't like Thatcher, but she's, a human being.
Yeah.
Relatively. However, we must never let the audience forget the great damage Thatcher did to the working class people in Britain. She also was the first PM to introduce anti-gay legislation into law in over 100 years. And that fits into it, because I heard of a story from some documentary about Thatcher's life. I think one of one of her cabinet members might have been gay, but didn't tell her for quite a while for understandable reasons. But he did in the end, and apparently she didn't mind it that much. And I think I wrote down here, like, I wanted that idea to be sort of a character arc. I realise now that may not work, not least of all because there's, like, implications of a potential real person there, which is a little bit weird, but anyway...
that would be incredibly difficult to script. I'm not saying it's impossible,
but it would be tough.
Yeah, it would be really difficult.
Yeah. If you want to scrap the idea, I'm fine. This is just one of my, I don't know, personal morbid fascinations.
No, I'm cool with it. I'm wondering if this is a neat opportunity for us to do something kind of fun. And I'm thinking now, but like I don't know if in modern Who, the TARDIS crew has ever like landed in like London in the 70s or 80s. So theoretically, like the United Nations Intelligence Task Force would still be active at this
Mm,
time. I'm wondering if like Retro Unit comes up in this story,
mm,
and like obviously not the Brigadier. We have to find a way to say, oh, the Brigadier is somewhere else.
yeah.
But it would be fun to have that as a thing, and then like we can like do a full exploration of like that side of the show, and
Yeah, that could be fun. Um, and also, like, when you think about it, like, the 1970s as a period, I don't think that's ever really been done before as in terms of a time travel destination.
yeah.
For Doctor Who, I mean, the closest we got was when, excuse me, in Father's Day when they went back to the 80s, but, slightly different thing.
And I'm also thinking because
Excuse me.
at the moment, I like the idea also of using this as an opportunity to reintroduce one of the slightly campier classic era monsters and like having
Oh,
it be like because it's the 70s, right? It fits
yeah.
in with the timeline perfectly.
Mm.
Um, and I lean on your knowledge here more than mine. Any thoughts?
Oh, I thought you had a specific one in mind.
Oh
Pardon
no
me.
no no.
Ooh, good question.
Even if we just do a more in-depth Auton episode for the first time since 2005 as well. Which, incidentally, happy 20 years New Who. That happened recently.
Happy 20 years. Yeah, I mean, the Auton thing could work. Do you want to? I mean, I know I sort of just asked this question, but just to be sure, do you want to stick with the Thatcher idea for now and try to work her into it, or are you more in
I
love
think
with this?
no. I think there's a very easy way of making these two concepts the same episode.
Sure.
Because, like, in exploring Thatcher's politics and the way the Doctor is interacting with him, it's also very easy if you work Unit in, like, especially Retro Unit into the mix, because you have an opportunity of addressing stuff that Doctor Who did in the past where the politics maybe weren't so great,
Mm.
and sort of making that, like, working that into like the full like cohesive package of the story, and then having Michelle having to react to all this and seeing perhaps a different side of this character that they're starting to get to know really well, like through traveling with. And then you've also got Gemma, who's maybe slightly more grown and lived now, and coming back to this era is able to see, oh, you know what? Maybe this wasn't so great. I shouldn't glamorize it anymore, but it is what it was.
Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah, I think we can. Yeah, certainly work with that. In terms of the monster, I think Autons could be fun. Let's just say that for now. But if I come up with any other slightly more thematically appropriate ideas, I'll certainly.
Because I think Autons are more of a consumerism thing.
Yeah. Well,
So
to be fair, so is Thatcher, but.
Well, yes, but that's not really the point of why she's in this story.
No.
And I don't know why Autons would specifically be targeting Thatcher as well.
Yeah, true. Yes, it's it's an interesting question. We'll deal with it, I suppose, when we get there. But yeah, that's the basic idea of that episode. Do you want to move on, or is there something else you want to add for this?
No. But I think this is a good chance to put Sam's episode in.
Sure, yeah, that's
because
fine.
I think strangely it feeds in pretty well based on the kind of themes we've been exploring in this one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep, that's fine.
And I should also point out, Sam and Hadley pitched their ideas separately. Hadley first, Sam second. They accidentally pitched kind of similar setups. The themes, the stories are all very different, but the setups became very similar. We've decided to just leave them as is because I think that's the way that they work the best.
Right. And they have very interesting, almost diametrically opposite thematic conclusions, which I find to be really interesting. Especially given I think some of the thematic concerns of this season are about the past, about digging into the past, thinking, could things have been different? Should we have changed different things? And that'll come in, I think, later on in the season. So yeah, I'm pretty happy leaving the episodes roughly as the same way. I mean, we can maybe add a few things here and there, but yes, I'm pretty satisfied with doing that. So yeah, if you want to move right on to Sam's story, yep, that's fine.
I'm just going to read this out verbatim from our chats.
Yeah.
So here is Sam's third episode that she's written for us. The Doctor and companions travel to a planet that the Doctor mentions once having visited ages ago, i.e. somewhere between Hartnell and now, the more ambiguous the better. During this first visit, the Doctor helped save the fledgling civilization from a nefarious alien threat and went off on their way, as they are wont to do. They arrive a good couple of thousand years after their initial visit and visit a museum so the companions are in their element, only to be shocked by displays about the supposed evil being who sent their society into the Dark Ages, known only as the Doctor. The Doctor is understandably upset to learn she's been vilified by this society when she saved them from aliens and wants to get to the bottom of things. What follows is a Rashomon-style investigation with the Doctor and companions, as casually as possible, trying to figure out how the mythology of those events worked out that way. They each start talking to people, historians and museum staff, each giving their own wildly different take on what the story of the Doctor is. We see these accounts in short little flashback vignettes, in which we see various previous incarnations of the Doctors played by lookalikes, in the same way that David Bradley has played the first Doctor several times, but with a slightly more comedic tilt. I'll leave the casting decisions to you, but I like the thought of Cole Meany as the Sixth Doctor, for example. We see versions where the Doctor is cartoonishly evil, like something out of a Flash Gordon serial, versions where it's a grim Dark Snyder versification of the series. One historian insists the Doctor isn't a real person and is just a metaphorical figurehead for a shitty period in their history. Some who thinks the Doctor is good, but then it becomes apparent they're a weirdo QAnon type. We see these in a variety of different film and even animation styles. Becoming increasingly frustrated, the Doctor decides to do some research of her own in the TARDIS, going over the history of this planet and the invading planet as well, desperate to clear her name. Eventually, she's able to find a bunch of contemporary documents where from the invaders, where the name the Doctor is even more demonized in their culture to the point of being a literal boogeyman figure to use to scare children. Eventually, the Doctor and companions reconvene and try to make sense of what the fuck happened after they left the first time. They figure out that after the initial invasion was dealt with, the invaders tried again, and the locals scared them off by threatening them with the Doctor, completely bluffing on their end, so they blew everything out of proportion. They kept this up for so long, their mythology eventually went from the Doctor is our terrifying and powerful protector to the Doctor is our terrifying and powerful oppressor. As much as they're bummed out by this, the trio all decide to leave things be and not correct their history, as it ended up being an important and formative part of their cultural development, and shattering that history purely for the Doctor's peace of mind isn't worth it. So she takes satisfaction in knowing that she knows the truth about her actions, and that things worked out in the end, while still having the whole, so there's cultures out there that think you're the devil, huh? Conversation. Acknowledging that even when she does good, it's sometimes pretty messy, and doesn't always work out for the best.
I really quite like that conclusion. It's different.
I do as well. My main issue with the story as presented, and I don't think Sam's going to have an issue with my take on this, is that it is so obviously a Star Trek concept.
Well,
and what I mean by that is, like, it's incredibly not Doctor Who, in that it's not like fighting an alien or like solving this issue that's like this apocalyptic thing. It's literally just a detective thing. And I think there's a way it can be done if you, like, really embellish those flashback storytelling moments to be the action scenes and the sci-fi bits. Then you can make it more of a Dr. Light episode in a weird way. Or at least a Phoebe Waller-Bridge Dr. Light with comedic lookalikes. This is where you get Jimmy Carr in to play a comedic version of the 11th Doctor, for example.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah, I mean, that could work. I guess, would it be particularly necessary to, like, I don't know, really firmly establish a connection between these flashbacks and the present Doctor? Like, I know that that's part of the plot, but I just don't want, like you say, that like from what you've said, and correct me if I'm wrong, you think there may be a need for a bit more, maybe a bit more spectacle, but I wouldn't want to go for spectacle just for the sake of it. I think it's just the narrative's got to be a bit more cohesive than that.
To be clear, I'm not suggesting drawing any kind of big like thing with the current Doctor or anything. Far from it. Like
Yeah, sure.
the Phoebe Waller-Bridge's Doctor's involvement in this episode is exclusively investigation and interviews. But I'm just saying, like, if we're gonna do this and have it still feel like a Doctor Who episode, then the flashback scenes need to be Doctor Who episodes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right. That makes sense.
And you can even use that as an opportunity to like wildly exaggerate the tropes of certain eras of the show.
Yeah, to parody it, yeah, in a really fun way.
Exactly.
Yeah, actually, that's kind of fun. And I was initially, I don't think I didn't say this, but when I read through this concept, having very stylized representations of the show in this sort of almost like a mythology building, Rashomon exercise, I was concerned about that a little bit because I thought, oh, how comedic do we want to make this? But I think parodying the show with this device is actually a really interesting idea that we can have quite a lot of fun with. And the fact, like, yeah, having like one of the flashbacks or even a couple being black and white, that's just I just think that's really quaint, I guess. Yeah, I don't know. I just find that very funny. Yeah. So I guess it's just about coming up with maybe not simplistic, but not as complex ideas for these flashbacks. Like, what are the doctors doing in these?
Well, again, you would just take the various attributes of different Doctors' eras and like extend them out to their like most ridiculous extreme. So, for example, you have like a John Pertwee lookalike run in, and he just does a bunch of Venusian karate on all the like aliens, and like it's essentially this like big like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon with a John Pertwee lookalike kind of thing.
Oh, can we please?
Yeah.
Can we please bring the Whomobile back, please?
Oh yeah, he flies in on the Whomobile.
I'm sorry. I'm just remembering the first time you reacted to the Whomobile when we did Invasion of the Dinosaurs because you didn't know that it was a thing.
And then you can have a Ninth Doctor thing, and it's told in like in the style of one of those like really broody anime things where it's just like lots of like downward shots from the Doctor's perspective and a lot of brooding. That's the Snyderification one. Sorry, no, that's the Snyder one. That's the dark and brooding one. It's starring a likeness of the Ninth Doctor, and they do nothing but brood and stuff. And then you've got when you jump to the interpretation where it's Matt Smith's Doctor, it's this wacky cartoon world.
As opposed to the normal version. Sorry, I'm joking, I'm being a dickhead. But yeah. No, I see what you mean. I think making it a cartoon world actually would work. Because in all seriousness, I know I've criticized that era and Matt Smith's performance, but that seems kind of consistent with that Doctor's character. I'm not 100%.
Well, it's consistent with how the character presented themselves. It's kind of like the coping through like wackiness and silliness thing, where it's like there's clearly some dark shit under the surface, but they're masking it with a happy-go-lucky demeanor and attitude to match.
Ooh, bow ties are cool. I love fish fingers. Watch me dance around in my ridiculous suits. Anyway,
basically, yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I've read like a Tumblr post or something that talked about something similar, that the 11th Doctor, despite or maybe sort of because of his goofiness, he is truly trying to hide something dark because there's unresolved trauma from even like the 10th Doctor specifically. But anyway,
well, it's also evident by, and we'll get there. But there are moments when Matt Smith is allowed to go dark, and it's some of the most sinister acting he gets to do, and it's genuinely like tense and stuff. So we'll get there though.
Yeah.
Yeah, now that we've got that sorted out, I actually quite like this as an idea, and
Yeah,
like I said, it allows us to it allows us to like lighten the load of the schedules of Phoebe Waller-Bridge, Georgia Henley, and Lucy Punch,
yeah,
for this
yeah,
episode specifically, and they get to do a little bit less, um, allowing for them
yeah,
to do more stuff in the future episodes.
yeah. And like you say that it's quite Star Trek, and I think that's true with the ending. You know, granted we've reviewed one episode in total, but there is
Oh
kind of
yeah,
an ambiguity to that ending where it's like, well, yeah, I guess maybe we better not interfere. Time to pack it in, Doctor, and you just deal with your existential issues on your own. But I actually really do like that because it is quite different for Doctor Who. Like the fact that the Doctor kind of has to accept that they didn't get the ending that they wanted, or they're not getting the answers they thought they were going to get. I think there's something really kind of rich about that. So yeah, I actually think that's really cool.
and obviously this takes place on an alien world, obviously, but it's still
Yeah.
in between on Earth time. It's in between the 80s and the 2020s, so that we can still have this "let's get them home" thing happen.
Yes. Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
brings
Yeah.
us
So
to
traveling.
episode 5.
Sorry.
What's with that nervous? What have you got planned, you cheeky bugger? What's going on?
Duff, what are two words that you would never expect to for B to associate with Doctor Who at almost any time in like a
B movie.
serious? Well, you kidding me? Doctor Who's an entire B movie. That's exactly what it is. Or do you
No,
mean
as
the
in
B movie?
Jerry Seinfeld's B movie.
Well, that's a pretty good guess, but you're nowhere near as close.
Okay.
Um, Cuff, how would you feel if I just said the phrase serial killer episode?
Elaborate.
I knew that reaction was going to be good. Okay, yes, I will elaborate. So, I've actually written down here the word serial killer in quotation marks because they don't actually mean a literal serial killer because that's like way too dark
We're not doing
for Doctor
anything
Who.
Broadchurch here.
No. What I mean is, there's something like an entity or a being that's going around not killing people but doing something to them that maybe incapacitates them, maybe puts them in like a temporary comatose state that no one can wake them out of, and they've got to be saved from that. But the reason I call it the serial killer episode is because and granted this is mainly because I've been doing a lot of like true crime has become one of my bigger fascinations over the last year. But one of the things I've learned is that when you look at like the history of serial killers, one of the biggest issues is actually the institutions surrounding the murders that happen and the things that allow these perpetrators to do what they do and to get away with it. And there are plenty of examples. I'm not going to go into them because we don't have the time. But basically just examples of some of the most vulnerable people in society being victimized, the rest of society not caring enough to stop it, and yeah. So I think though that's what I'm actually interested in. I'm interested in looking at those sorts of themes of bigotry and privilege. And I'll read out this synopsis because it kind of fits in together. This episode involves the Doctor and companions traveling into the far future to a space colony that is being terraformed by like a group of poor laborers. These laborers work for a large number of rich people and their families who regularly exploit and treat them terribly. These rich people are like the investors on this terraforming project. Several laborers have gone missing by this point. They're feared to have been like sort of taken by someone or something that's sort of stalking the work site that they're on. One day a body, and again I'm using that in quotation marks, turns up and it seems physically unharmed, but it's being put into some sort of like psychic coma that appears incurable. So this is the big sort of threat that we're looking at. So the Doctor shows up and uses the psychic paper to impersonate a detective, tasked with finding the killer, again in quotation marks. And I have this one little small parentheses here. I thought, could the could the damage be done with tissue compression? Could this make the Doctor be more interested to solve the mystery because, it could be the Master? That might be a bit too complicated, but that was just an idea I had. Anyway.
It's the Valyard, and this is where we introduced them.
Yeah, that could work.
Also, if this is the far future, does that mean they've absolutely overshot Gemma and Michelle's home by this point?
Yes, but I will say, I think this is one of those ideas where I thought, it doesn't have to necessarily be sequential. This could be a later episode in the season, because it's fairly... Okay. It feels quite standalone. It's not, there's not really anything else. So I don't think there's anything, directly connecting it to a previous episode, so we can do it later on in the season if we need to. But yeah, it is in the far future. So, okay, so this is the last bits. This episode can explore themes of bigotry and privilege, as everyone thinks it was a fellow labourer who was responsible, and they do not care about the victims, that they being the rich people, they don't care. Most of the victims are labourers, but halfway through the episode, a rich person from the village is taken, suspicions spread, and finally the rich people start paying attention. And I think, I've got here, the killer turns out to be, a friendly rich person, who's, doing this for some reason. So that's the idea.
Okay. In that case, it's definitely the Valyard that has supplied them with the equipment needed to do this.
As in, the equipment needed to carry out the murders,
the tissue compression stuff. And then it can also be the Valyard who's responsible for the Hydra in ancient Greece, for example. And we can weave the Valyard throughout the story. The thing is setting traps the Doctor as a way of being I'm testing. What are you gonna do? How much are you doing? Are you doing good enough? That can be.
Yeah, that's that's a good one.
And especially that especially works for this story, because presumably the Valyard's question at the end of this is going to be, and spoiler alert, I know a little bit about what the Valyard's motivations are.
Yeah.
But as a result of this story, the Valyard can also look at, you fixed that serial killer problem, but you didn't do anything about the systemic issues on the planet itself. You just left. You continue to let those people get impoverished, but hey, you made sure they didn't die. Well done.
Yeah, that's actually a really good idea. I hadn't thought about that, but that's really neat. Because I think originally my goal for the Valyard was meant to be set in stone. They know what they're going to do. They're not fucking around. They're just going ahead to do it. But the way you're sort of describing it, it's almost like in testing the Doctor's moral fortitude. It's almost like the Valyard hasn't even come to a 100% conclusion. It's this is a last sort of gasp of hope. It's okay, I'm going to test them last few times to see if they're really up for the challenge. And
I also like that because, based on what I know of Trial of a Time Lord, it sort of does continue on from that. This really does feel like the Valyard is sort of judge, jury, and executioner here, putting the Doctor on trial by testing him out all these times,
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds like a really actually. I like that. So,
what's your other idea before we move too far on from this one? Does it have a specific time frame set in stone, or is it another nebulous one?
Sorry, which do you mean? The other episode that I've got in mind?
The one that isn't the 2-part finale and isn't the one you just talked about. Is there another one you've got that you have an idea for, or no?
Yes. This is.
Does that one have a specific time period, or is it more nebulous like this one is?
The time is a bit nebulous, but the actual setting, the space, definitely is not. This is. I think I hinted to you about this idea before. This episode is the never before seen Daleks and Doctor collab episode.
Oh yes, I forgot about
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
Um, in that case, tough because episode
Mm.
5, based on our current structure, should be the moment where they finally accidentally overshoot Gemma and Michelle's
Mm.
home, and
Mm.
there's a bit of a they have a bit of a fight over it. Michelle, especially, kind of
Mm.
like is very very angry,
Mm.
and that resentment carries on through to the rest of the season. When presumably the Doctor's able to fix the TARDIS.
Mm.
Because if you just don't do it, then that's weird.
Yeah. Um. So, do you want to?
Can I ask before we move
Yeah.
any further on?
Yeah. Go ahead.
The idea that the TARDIS is stuck and can't go
Mm.
back and has to go forward,
Mm.
is that important to the finale?
Um. No, not in terms of plot. Maybe thematically, ideas of regretting the past and thinking, could I have done things differently? What's the purpose of me traveling around space and time and whatnot? But I think for me, it was more. I think you even mentioned it before. It's like, wow, you really love fucking around with the TARDIS, don't you? I think it was
Yeah,
more of
and
a
for
me
that
being in love with an idea.
for that reason, and also because, like, again, we're running out of spots to put this point where they accidentally overshoot. It may have to be an idea that we just let go
Right.
of.
Yeah, that's fine.
And also because it's already been pretty established that, like, hey, once you've landed somewhere, you're part of events, and you can't
Yeah,
go back and stop at something that you yourself, a time traveler,
true. True.
previously did.
True.
So that idea is already kind of present, but again, like, we'll
That's
see
fine.
once we get to the end of the season, and if we figure out that this doesn't really work, then we can figure something
Yeah,
out. But
that's
for now,
fine.
I'm gonna make episode 5 the serial killer episode.
Cool.
Far future, tissue compression, killer, bigotry, and classism. At the end, the Valiard reveals themselves
Mm.
as the mastermind behind several of the Doctor's recent adventures. Cool. Before we get into Daleks,
Uh-huh.
I think this is a good spot to put Hadley's episode.
Yeah, sure.
So I will once again read this synopsis in full.
Mm-hmm.
Hadley was kind enough to title this episode as well, so that's one less thing we've got to think about when this is all over. This episode is called The Savior from the Midnight Obelisk, which is a metal-ass title.
Hey,
The Doctor's...
as a
Go on.
metalhead, I'll decide that cuff. But yes,
Alright.
you are correct. You are correct.
The Doctor is continuing to work on repairing the TARDIS as it arrives at a random point in space and time. The Doctor identifies that they are on the planet Muxalon and will not make contact with the species from another planet for 3,000 years, so minimal interference is crucial. The Doctor calls her companions over to the wardrobe to wear something inconspicuous, but Michelle is distracted by what appears to be a malfunctioning part of the TARDIS's controls, which will probably end up being the Valiard mucking around. While getting changed, the Doctor and Gemma remark on Michelle's defiance. Michelle thinks the Doctor could do a lot of good reshaping history, considering the atrocities that have happened over the course of the Earth's history. This and Gemma's maturity is why she has a key to the TARDIS and Michelle does not. They realize Michelle is not getting changed with them, and the TARDIS goes off again. The Doctor rushes out and sees Michelle messing with the TARDIS controls. The Doctor scolds Michelle, who gets defensive, insisting something looks wrong. The Doctor notices the TARDIS is in the same space, but is now 100 years in the future. She discovers what Michelle has messed with was the chameleon circuit, a function of the TARDIS that allows it to blend in with the environment. She turns it back on and orders Michelle to get changed, planning to explore the planet and do damage control. I think we're going to change that to just like the cloaking, so that she basically just turns the TARDIS invisible, as opposed to like fixing the chameleon circuit. But we'll figure that out. The three leave the TARDIS and come across a race called the Tharians. They are a warrior race with curved horns. Michelle remarks on their similarity to the Spartans. They are taken to an amphitheater where a play called The Savior from the Midnight Obelisk is playing. The Tharians are depicted as heroic and beautiful, and their villages are frequently raided by the Shargles, who are depicted in cartoonish monstrous masks. When all hope seems lost of defeating the Tharians defeating the Shargles, a deep blue obelisk descends and a great Tharian warrior emerges who defeats the Shargles. The Doctor realizes the Savior is supposed to be her. They further explore Tharian civilization and discover the Savior has become their god, and they are waiting for his second coming to eliminate the Shargles. The Tharians had abandoned their old gods upon briefly seeing the TARDIS. Michelle remarks civilizations often let go of polytheistic religions in favor of monotheistic ones. The Doctor further chastises Michelle, interpreting her remark as a way of dismissing her mistake. They follow the Tharians on a raid of a Shargle village. They discover the Shargles are identical, except for having curled horns instead of curved ones. The Doctor insists on minimal interference, but Michelle gets in the way of a Tharian attacking a Shargle child. The Shargles believe Michelle to be with the Tharians and kidnap her. Gemma begs the Doctor to rescue Michelle, but she is worried about causing further damage. The Doctor convinces the Tharian commander to meet with the Shargle commander, and she acts as a mediator. The commanders are both cartoonish, over-the-top warmongering types. Both the Tharians and the Shargles believe in the Savior, but disagree over whether he is a Tharian or a Shargle. The Doctor tries to get them to see their similarities, but they continue to disagree over the Saviour's identity. Gemma uses this meeting as an opportunity to sneak into the Shargle camp and rescue Michelle. Michelle breaks down, insisting she thinks that she can stop the fighting if the Doctor just agreed to interfere more, and worries the Doctor sees her as a screw-up. Gemma embraces Michelle, and the latter takes the opportunity to steal the TARDIS keys and bolts. The Tharians and Shargles' argument escalates to an agreement to a final battle to the death. Gemma rushes over to the Doctor and explains what Michelle did. This further annoys her and chastises Gemma for not doing more to stop her. Gemma realizes that Michelle was right about the Doctor's mistrust in Michelle and lectures her about how nothing she's done has worked either, and is just worried that Valeyard is right. The Doctor ignores her and rushes to the site of the battle to try and get in between them, and the TARDIS appears in between the parties. The Doctor realizes Michelle has turned off the cloaking circuit, and the Tharians and Shargles stop fighting to watch what the TARDIS does. Michelle uses the TARDIS speaker to build up anticipation of the Saviour's second coming, then emerges from the TARDIS. The Tharians and Shargles are disgusted to discover the Savior is a young girl and insists she's a false prophet. The Tharians and Shargles move to attack her, and the Doctor and Gemma manage to get inside and shut the door. The Doctor is angrier at Michelle than ever, calling her childish and naive, and threatens to have her on a leash for the rest of the journey. Gemma argues that Michelle's actions have united the Tharians and Shargles over a common enemy, and that minimal interference is not always the right approach. The Doctor takes a minute to compose herself and realizes they are right. She apologizes, and Michelle apologizes for interfering with the TARDIS's controls. They brace for the TARDIS's next jump in time.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I like putting this one immediately after the Valeyard's reveal, because the Doctor is clearly on edge and way more snippy at Michelle than she maybe otherwise would have been, and that can be a way of explaining that. Something I also just really love is the subtle thing about the both sides of the war completely dismissing the Savior as a young woman. I love that. You just know that if Christian God was real and was a woman and she appeared in a church, half the people there would be like, "You're not God. God's a man. What are you doing?"
Yeah.
I just love that social commentary from Hadley. That's really fucking good.
Yeah, I think that's quite clever. And also thematically, I like this story, and I think placing it in this order also makes sense, because we've already had sort of these opportunities where the Doctor could have maybe interfered, but she didn't for various reasons, maybe some more justified than others. But it makes sense that Michelle is feeling as indignant as she is by this point, because she realizes, we have this very powerful person with this, miraculous time machine.
And what have they been doing?
Yeah, exactly. We had a horrible oppressed society in the far future that the Doctor didn't fix properly. We had Margaret Thatcher, who didn't really change, her policies certainly didn't change after that. We had a whole story being Sam's one where one of the bigger lessons is, it's probably better off not to interfere with history. So now we've got this situation where Michelle's just kind of fed up with it.
And I think it also makes a lot of sense, because considering the kind of person that Michelle is, and really a lot of people are, if you step on board a time machine, obviously your first question is going to be, so, can we do anything about like the terrible atrocities that have happened in human history? Like, are we just going to leave all them alone? And it doesn't, and not everyone, upon hearing the rules of time travel, is going to instantly go, okay, that's fair enough. We should let those things happen.
Sure.
So
I do
having
think
a character on board that is like way more defiant about wanting to fix that stuff, despite the Doctor's like best interests, is a good call, I think.
And I think it's also interesting because I did say that one of the reasons I wanted these two characters to be historians or historian adjacent types is that you wouldn't need to overly explain how the laws of time work, in that, you know, obviously past impacts future, so you would think both would be on board with not fucking around with the past or fucking around with historical events too much. But having Michelle be a bit more hot-headed, I think makes a really interesting dynamic, and maybe you could even be, you know, there could be conversations where Gemma could be like, you know, Michelle, what are you talking about? You study ancient history. Can you imagine what would happen if, you know, all these past events didn't happen, all these big things? And maybe Michelle could say, yeah, actually I do. Do you have any idea how many useless, pointless wars were fought in the ancient world? Do you know how many people died of diseases that we now have cures for? I mean, what are you talking about, Mum? You know, there's there's very interesting sort of a combativeness there as to how we're going to thematically solve both of those, you know, competing ideas. I don't know, but we'll get to it. Because I think it is quite interesting.
We've now reached episode 7, and I think we've left the audience on this genuine cliffhanger moment of Doctor teams up with Daleks, and I'm sure them, along with me, are curiously wondering how you're going to justify this. So
now,
take it away.
Now, I will say,
bear in mind, just bear in mind.
Yeah.
We have seen the Daleks in this era before. They were in the previous season, and they razed Astropolis to the fucking ground mercilessly.
Mercilessly. Yeah.
Yep. And, you know, recently we've seen them commit, like, my whole mission statement with the Daleks last season, if you recall, was make them scary again. So I'd love for you to take that and run with it. But also
sure.
Protagonist. So go ahead.
Yeah. I will say the idea of, you know, the TARDIS not being able to travel back in time, that does fit into this story. We could change it, but anyway, yeah. So I'll get to it.
Present it as is for now, and then we'll see how it goes.
Okay. After the mystery of the colony is solved, that's just what I wrote, so whatever, the Daleks immediately capture the Doctor and her friends. They hold her TARDIS for ransom in exchange for her help to assess and defeat a threat that could destroy the Daleks' existence by erasing their species from history. The Doctor is understandably delighted at first by this, but then realizes several problems. One, it will disrupt the timeline to an enormous degree, and the Doctor's not willing to mess around with it. Secondly, the Daleks inform her that they have received a message stating that part of this erasure involves erasing the Doctor from history as well. They don't know who this person is, but somehow the Doctor and the Daleks determine that it is genuine, the message. Maybe the Doctor receives... Right? Yeah. Of course it is. Maybe the Doctor receives a psychic message from the dangerous being. Wink, wink. Here's where it gets a little interesting. Maybe Dalek Sec is part of this band of Daleks and also receives this message from the Vortex. It would be useful to throw the audience off the scent by making them think it is the Master who is behind it. It also could mean that the serial killer in the previous episode is using tissue compression as its weapon. Also, Dalek Sec promises to fix the Doctor's TARDIS so it can travel anywhere in time again. The Doctor, of course, doesn't believe this for a second, but the desperation of the situation leaves her no choice but to help the Daleks.
So the Valeyard has, like, put out a threat that something else is going to erase the Daleks from the timeline, right? Because this isn't the episode where the Valeyard is defeated, yeah?
Yeah, no. It's like I think it's the Valeyard, but like this is not the episode.
But there's like a device or something.
Yeah, it's like or some power that they have that's having
Cool.
God, almost like a fuck. I don't want to bring this up. Almost like a flux thing, I guess, like having like a ripple effect in
Okay, yeah.
time. And but it's like this cataclysmic event, and it's something so immense that neither the Doctor nor the Daleks can defeat it on their own, and the Doctor realizes, fuck, I guess I better help these guys.
Sure.
Damn it.
And how does
Yeah.
Dalek Sec fit into all this, considering that we've seen them die?
Yeah, that was a bit of a on the fly idea for me
Sure.
because I just thought, yeah, he's got like a connection to the time vortex. He stared into it, right? That's what drove him crazy. So that makes sense.
That was Dalek Khan.
I thought it was Dalek Sec.
Dalek
No,
Sec is the one that turned himself human.
thank you for that correction. Yes, sorry, I meant Dalek Khan.
Who we've also seen die, incidentally.
I was gonna say, I'm sure. I had a feeling that must have happened at some point.
Actually, no. Actually, in fairness, Dalek Khan only died to the extent that Davros also died in that story, in that we didn't actually see it happen.
Okay, one of those classic. Yeah. Okay. Oh well, yeah, we could make that work too.
Yeah. Speaking of Davros, you don't want to make this Dr. Davros story, and you want to use the Daleks specifically?
Yes, I think I'd mentioned. I think I did say to you before. I did just want it to be specifically the Daleks because we've seen, instances, particularly in the Big Finish stuff. Doctor Davros collabs. We reviewed, a story from Big Finish that had that exact premise.
We did, but that premise had Davros like still scheming behind the Doctor's back, whereas this one would be no
genuine, genuine
purely
collab.
mutually beneficial.
I guess so. I think one of the issues with the Daleks, and maybe this is why I sort of wanted Dalek Khan, is that they can be a little bit one-dimensional, at least if you don't use them very well. And especially if they're, like, in a mass, right? Like, there's some dimensions to the Dalek in the episode Dalek, but that's just because there's one, and it's the first time we've seen them in the revival and all that stuff. So, yeah, maybe Davros might be better in terms of just having a like someone the Doctor can communicate with that's a little bit more humanoid, I guess, both in not just in form but in I guess attitude or mentality. Even if Davros is a terrible person,
Yeah.
that could work because I think the tension here would be, like I said, the Doctor wouldn't trust, like in this case, Davros for a second. She's got no reason to trust Davros.
She would have less reason to trust the Daleks as a horde.
Yeah, because they could have Davros kidnapped and captured for all she knows. And she'd also have to contend with the fact that Davros undoubtedly by this point would already be sort of scheming against the Daleks, as he always does, because he can't even trust them. So I think, yeah, there'd be a tension there where the audience will be waiting constantly, okay, where's the betrayal? Where's the betrayal? It's going to happen. But maybe it never does. Maybe it genuinely is the case that this threat is so big that Davros, he just needs the Doctor. And not even in a, you're my only friend in the universe, Doctor, isn't that funny? No, in a literal, we're all gonna fucking die.
But it's also like the respect that's always been between the two characters being like,
yes,
I acknowledge I'm not smart enough to figure this out, but with the help of this other incredibly smart person, we can work it out. I also quite like that this sort of almost, and you probably figured you worked this out on purpose, but it almost exactly like it's exactly the situation that Michelle has been talking about all season, where it's like she probably would have moral objections to saving the Daleks from time in this situation, being like, are you kidding? The billions of lives you could save by doing this, like, and you're still going to save them? And then
it's almost like a reflection of of
The
Genesis, really.
ramifications. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, that old question: does the Doctor
I'm
have
gonna
the
put,
right?
I'm gonna put Davros as a maybe because I think I'm not sure. It would very much depend on how you want to script conversations between the Doctor and the Daleks slash
Mm,
Davros.
mm.
Um, I
Yeah,
don't know.
because I think, well, I think maybe that's one of the problems, right, with Dalek Davros stories is that because Davros has more dimensions as a character and is just more interesting, the Daleks always have to take a more not subservient, but sort of a back role, I guess,
Well,
in
here's
comparison, and it works better than in others. Like I think you mentioned, it's not great in Revelation of the Daleks, where you wonder why the fuck are the Daleks even here. But
yes. Um, and I kind of have that with this as well. Especially
Mhm.
if we do end up including Davros, because this could just be the Doctor and Davros, and it would be the first time on TV that Davros has existed without the Daleks, which I think would be interesting.
Mm,
But kind of selfishly, I also have a Dalek story in mind for a future season that really puts them into the forefront and the focus,
mm,
and kind of does similar things as what you're trying to do here, while not like taking away their fear factor from
sure.
previous seasons that we tried to set up. So I might make it just a Davros story if that's all right.
Yeah, I think that could
But
work.
The Daleks can be in it, but I think but only in the sense of like, oh, you know, I've got a Dalek here, but that's just to like make sure you don't try anything
Mm.
funny and kill me and whatever.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, sure. Yeah, no, I think that can work because I think it's mostly for me that thematically exciting idea of the Doctor collaborating with a sworn enemy, and that can be Davros as well as it, being the Daleks. And if you've got an idea for using the Daleks later on that also maintains that sense of terror, I think, yeah, probably this one being a mostly Davros centric story, I think might be better.
Cool.
Yep.
We've reached episode 8, and now it's time for my one.
Yep.
This is the only idea I had coming into this season.
Uh huh.
And here's what I want to do. I want to take um an so here's the thing. You and I can both agree that the Moffat era is far from perfect.
Yeah. Moments of brilliance,
Mhm.
perhaps, but there are, at the very least, there are certain episodes which we both have issue with.
Indeed.
I'm sure. Yeah.
Additionally, Moffat is someone who loves a fantastic concept.
Oh yeah, very concept heavy writer for
Yeah.
sure.
And oftentimes in execution, those concepts aren't quite fully realized.
Yeah.
I want to
I
take
think.
one of those concepts and
Hmm.
fully realize it.
Ooh, interesting.
And it's not
Do
the one
tell.
you're probably thinking of. Because the one I'm thinking of is arguably one of the more iconic and creepy monsters that Moffat introduced during his run.
Uh huh.
And that's the silence.
Ooh.
Now, here's the thing with the
Ooh.
silence.
Mm-hmm.
The silence are at their most creepy when you are experiencing the world through the eyes of a companion. There is a
Yeah,
sequence
I'd
in
believe
Day of the
that.
Moon. There is a sequence in Day of the Moon where Amy is wandering around this abandoned orphanage,
Mm-hmm.
and she enters this one room, and instantly she sees that a little microphone thing that's been implanted into her hand for them to activate when they see silence has been activated. And she's like, "Oh shit, I've seen these things." She plays it, and the recording of her is terrified. And as she tries to leave the room, we see more and more tallies have been added to her arms and her face,
Mm.
but she doesn't obviously remember it. So it's like they're just appearing instantly. It is
Yeah.
by far the single creepiest silence scene. But within that scene, it
Mm.
is immediately ruined because eventually it does show us Amy seeing them and her perspective. We see the silence. And that's just not,
Right. Yeah.
and that takes a lot of the fun out of it, in my opinion.
Yeah. Sure, yeah, I can understand that. Were the silence, apart from the Pandorica episode, were they only in that 1 2-parter?
They came back in the season 6 finale, and that
Right.
was basically it. They were more allies in Matt Smith's regeneration story, but apart from that, that was all of their involvement.
Yeah.
Here's what I want to do with the silence.
Mhm.
Oh, sorry. The other aspect of the silence, which is terrifying, is they can implant post-hypnotic suggestion while you're looking at them. You might not remember this, but like if a silence tells you, hey, you should, as an example, tell this person your deep dark secret.
Mm-hmm.
Later on, you won't know why, but you're going to be compelled to tell that person your deepest, darkest secret.
Mm-hmm.
And that's another thing that I don't think the silence explores enough.
Mm.
Here's what I want to do with this episode.
Sure.
Until the last 2 minutes, you don't know the silence are in the story.
Ooh. Yeah, I
What
like
you think
that.
it is just people getting a bit, like there's some kind. I picture this as kind of like a like there's a spaceship, for example, like adrift in deep space, and the crew is at each other's throats, and they're they're just on edge the entire time. They're a bit like freaked out and like jittery and not quite right in the head. TARDIS crew arrives, and over the course of them investigating this thing, which is like something is slowly killing the crew, we don't know what it is, but something is slowly killing the crew. Over the course of the story, the TARDIS crew themselves start to get more and more agitated. They get more and more angry with each other, and it's because the silence is influencing them to do so.
Yeah.
But you don't know that at first because we can play into a bunch of these themes we've been picking up on throughout the season.
Yeah. So we just think it's normal character development.
We just think it's like heightened, exaggerated. Like these guys are angry at each other because of stuff that's been building up and because of the stressful situation. But actually, it's the silence, like bringing this stuff out of them.
Yep.
Then at the end of the episode, the Doctor realizes it's the silence. We don't see them. Or maybe we do, but like it's like again, the Doctor has set up this thing where it's like, I recorded this somehow. Let me listen to this back. It's the silence, and then we see like a flashback thing of like what happened, and then we see the silence finally. And at the end of that, the Doctor's like, "Hang on a second, you guys are a splinter cell from a church, and the whole reason you guys came after me in the first place was to stop me from reaching Trenzalore. So you're back. So what am I going to do that you're trying to stop?" And that's the mystery box that we leave on to resolve in a future season.
Nice. I really like that. That sounds really cool. Sounds very, quite chilling, really. Because I do remember that scene in those first episodes with them where I think this is the scene I'm thinking of where the tally marks keep appearing on Amy's body.
That's the one, yeah.
And that is very creepy. But if the companions, if they don't even know what this thing is, and the Doctor doesn't know that it's the silence, they won't even be able to do that. So it makes it even more terrifying. And I wonder, yeah, I mean, I guess like if it is a situation where people are kind of getting picked off one by one, obviously that's quite terrifying. But I wonder how, like, could it start with the Doctor trying to ease tensions by taking them to maybe not a resort, but some sort of destination, almost like a holiday where they can get away from it all, but they still keep having these problems, and you think, oh, I guess they haven't dealt with these issues, have they? There's still problems under the surface, and then you realize, oh, it's actually the silence who are at least making things worse.
Yeah, it's this. The silence are like not putting ideas in their heads, but they're like convincing them to like speak on the stuff that they're keeping hidden and keeping pushed down and not saying because they don't want to make things worse. Yeah. But by the end, things are at their worst, and I imagine at the end of the episode, no one on the TARDIS is speaking to each other, and that goes unresolved.
Oof, nice. And do you think this could be a time, particularly because we haven't focused on Gemma that much, but if this could be an opportunity for it, those tensions between this mother and daughter team to really come to the fore. I don't know exactly how that would look, but something like that.
I imagine that a certain layer of it would be Gemma watching the Doctor like scolding Michelle all these times, and surely some layer of Gemma's psyche would be like, "You're trying to parent my daughter. You don't get to do that."
Yeah, that's
like
true.
You've got authority on the ship, but like, don't raise my child for me.
Yeah.
And then there would probably be something with Michelle where she's saying that, like, Michelle probably wouldn't have seen the instances where Gemma, like, backs her up to the Doctor. And there probably would be an element of, whenever the Doctor's, like, chastising me, why the fuck do you never speak up? You're meant to be my mother. Because because that's a thing that probably that happens so much with parenthood and child raising, where it's like, there's different aspects of yourself that you put on in various moments. Like, the person your child thinks you are is not who you are. And I think that's probably a good thing to explore with this dynamic as well.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. No, I think that's quite good. And I guess, like, the fact that Michelle is obviously quite opinionated and that comes into play with her conflicts, I don't know whether you want to explore that too much here, because we've already sort of touched on it a fair bit. But having that,
like, I don't think that there would necessarily be anything that about this episode's plot in particular that Michelle could latch onto, but it would more just be like the bubbling tensions over the previous episodes, and the fact that like there's like maybe the episode begins and they've just come back from the holiday. And they're putting on this like, oh hey, like I'm glad we was like, aren't things great now? But they're all putting on a facade because like things aren't great right now.
Sure. No, I think that sounds like a really cool idea for an episode.
And it leaves our characters rather at their lowest moment, which leads us handily onto the only multi-part story of the season in our 2-part finale. The Valeyard's been mucking about with the TARDIS, been causing some problems for the Doctor to solve and testing how they do so. I am so curious to see where this all's all been leading. Fitz?
So am I, because I don't actually have a complete actual conclusion here.
Okay, we can figure it out.
Yeah. Like, I've got some idea of it, but I don't know exactly how it's going to manifest. So anyway, so this is just what I've written for part 2, because I just wanted to sort of get the sort of ending sort of.
Let's figure out where we're going and then figure out how to get there.
Yep. So, finale part 2. At some point, the Valeyard confronts the Doctor on the basis of compassion, in a scene that disturbs the Doctor more than they have been by villain in a long time. The Valeyard is the Doctor, so they understand the need for compassion, and they need to try, nope, sorry, I fucked it up. And try to use this as a defense for destroying the Doctor. The Doctor doesn't believe this, but still feels shaken by the idea. There has to be something that convinces the Doctor, her companions, and the audience that the Valeyard is ultimately wrong. It should be simple, with some sentimentality, but not corny or easily dismissed. Maybe we see how many friendships the Doctor has made, and the great connections between individuals, societies, and species that have arisen because of her throughout the years. I think I may have sort of been missing one of the big bits here that we know about, but the audience doesn't here. The Valeyard, wants to erase the Doctor from history because they believe that they're not a force for good in the universe when you try and tally up all of the impacts that they've had in the universe. So the Valeyard would basically accuse the Doctor of being like a, sort of really like a mass murderer when it suits them, but then being too much of a coward when they need to act in other moments. And this will sort of reflect on the themes we've been exploring in this season in a really interesting way. And even more than that, by erasing the Doctor from history, the Valeyard will know that this will destroy them as well, because they are the Doctor, but that's a sacrifice they're willing to make. That's how hell-bent they are on doing this.
Cool.
Yeah. So
Can I
that's the idea.
propose? Can I
Hmm.
propose a resolution of sorts?
Sure.
So obviously Michelle and the Doctor have not seen eye to eye for much of this season.
Hmm.
But I like the idea of Michelle coming in at some point when the Doctor maybe has sort of become despondent and like is the closest to agreeing with the Valyard that they will get to be.
Sure.
And then Michelle comes in and goes, "Hang on a minute. How do you know that this isn't a force for good? Let's take the Doctor away. How many lives now are gone? So this
Hmm.
and if you do this, those deaths are on your hands, Valyard. So are you a force for good? And if not,
Hmm.
what gives you this authority?" And it's Michelle
Hmm.
using her like exact mentality she's been coming at the Doctor with all season to turn it
Yeah.
around on the Valyard. And that's
Hmm.
maybe where the Doctor can pick back up and Michelle can have that moment of like, look, I understand that, there are rules and like there are and the thing I haven't been understanding this whole time is that, you know, we've both been on the same side. All we've wanted is
Hmm.
to help people. That's all you've wanted as well, and that makes you different
Hmm.
from the Valyard. And
Hmm.
that's what the Valyard is missing.
Hmm. Yeah, I really like that. I think having Michelle sort of come in and sort of like she's obviously sort of being the Doctor's savior or redeemer in a way, but that still really works. It doesn't feel corny or and certainly not easily dismissed. So I think yeah, that's a really good idea.
The only thing we have left to figure out is like how does this sustain 2 episodes? Like how is
Yeah,
the
like
Valyard doing
what's the
this?
setup? Yeah,
What's the setup?
yeah,
And why has the Val does the Doctor maybe land somewhere? So this is difficult because you've got
yeah.
this really cool thematic thing, and
Hmm.
I like it as a resolution to a full season, but I have no
Yeah,
idea how it plays into the final act of a
yeah,
two-part story.
yeah. Um, maybe maybe something could happen. Because actually, can we just? I just want to establish the order. So this is going to happen after your silence episode. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Um. Hmm. Well, I think it can be fairly safely assumed that the Valiard and the Doctor must have some sort of psychic link because they are essentially the same person, right?
Yeah.
So if this is a moment when the Valiard manifests, I think it would be useful if they're the one directly choosing to do it. Like this is kind of like if even if this isn't like the literal exact moment of a master plan they've been planning, they're taking the opportunity to confront the Doctor when they're the most vulnerable and try to convince them that, hey, your presence isn't actually very good in this universe, so fuck you. So I think it probably would be useful if this was a purely Valeyard orchestrated setup.
Yes.
So
I agree.
they could maybe take the TARDIS, and it could like literally happen like right after they're all sitting in their own corners of the TARDIS, not talking to each other. Literally, it could just the TARDIS could get ripped, maybe even outside of the universe into some sort of um.
Like
Yeah, actually, no. Isn't there a thing in Doctor Who like called the Void, where
the void is the space between realities and
yeah.
dimensions. Um, there's also like we know that things can exist outside the universe in like soap bubbles clinging onto the main larger bubble.
Hmm.
Um, like that's been a thing before as well. So there are options. The void seems like a bit of a stretch,
Mm-hmm. Sure. Or
but
maybe even like a small pocket dimension or something, just
pocket
somewhere
dimension
to.
pocket dimension also works and makes sense given the Valyard's Time Lord origins. Like that's definitely Time Lord tech.
Yeah, just a place that's frozen in a way, almost frozen from the effects of space and time. Um,
I also
um,
I had a scene idea, and maybe
hmm,
this could be the scene idea that becomes like key to Michelle like turning around on the Doctor. But I
hmm,
feel like at a certain point the Doctor has been separated from Gemma and Michelle. And they are trying to figure out something to help the Doctor out. By this point, they know the Valeyard's plan and they know the Valeyard's mission statement. Like,
yeah.
oh, because obviously they do. They learnt a bit about it in episode 5.
Yeah.
And I love the idea of Michelle and Gemma doing archaeological research and like finding like the Doctor like popping up in various points throughout history, like places they've maybe we see that the marble thing from the end of the fires of Pompeii, like that big like a monument to the Doctor and Donna from the end of that. Or maybe we see let's see, modern history. I don't know, but they just find evidence of the Doctor's travels throughout history, and
there could be photos, isn't there? Like in the first episode of the revival,
we see that poorly photoshopped Chris Eccleston at JFK.
Yeah, maybe not something that intense, but something like that, like a photo where it's like, oh, wait a minute. I think it would just be important that the companions know that the Doctor is a Time Lord and that they regenerate and have different forms. But I guess if we've already done an episode where we've seen
them
flashbacks, and maybe
also
there's something we can work in there.
But also, like Onyx, like if in order for the Doctor to explain the concept of the Valeyard to the companions, they would have to get into regeneration.
Yep, they would, and they could be like throwaway comments like, "Oh, I've weirdly enough, I've been a Scotsman twice. Don't know how that works." Yeah, so, but things like that.
And that's the moment where Michelle sort of turns around and is like, okay, they're clearly getting involved, but like, maybe I've been too harsh or stuff like that,
they're like, but it's the toss-up, right, for Michelle, because it's like, they're not doing enough for, like, maybe for my own moral purposes, but then maybe she realizes, oh, they're actually doing a bit more than I realized, and they've been a bigger part of our history than anyone really is perhaps able to acknowledge. So little things like that. And I really like the whole collaborative archaeology thing, so we could have, I don't know, I don't want to go too much on here's your history lesson, kids, but they could have conversations and what's the difference between a secondary source and a primary source, and we could have Michelle digging through like archaeological finds, but then we can have Gemma reading through pages and pages of documents, maybe taking notes on them or something like that. So when they get separated, they presumably Michelle and Gemma are back on Earth.
That was my understanding. The Doctor has like, maybe it's even like at the start of episode 9. Like the Doctor's gotten control of the TARDIS again, and like has decided, you know what, this isn't working out. Have fun. I'm dropping you off.
Yeah.
This was a bad idea. And then maybe something happens in modern day Earth, like there's a big like event that happens, and the Doctor's like, oh, hang on, what's that? And goes to investigate, and Michelle maybe doesn't trust the Doctor to save them because she's like, oh, well, what if this is a fixed point in time? We wouldn't know, would we? We'd just be more of your victims. And I like the idea that maybe this is like a stealth 2-part story, in that like it carries on in the same way that Utopia carries on to Sound of Drums.
Yeah.
Like maybe the day gets saved, like whatever this alien incursion is, the day is saved by someone else like sacrificing themselves, as so often happens in Doctor Who. Like someone that they meet in the course of the story, maybe someone who works at UNIT, makes a big sacrifice play. And the Valeyard uses that moment to go, Doctor, you could have done that. I judge you poorly. And then snatches the Doctor into this pocket dimension thing. And then the Doctor and Gemma and Michelle, if it is at UNIT, that's how they get back to that pocket dimension, because they can be like, UNIT, figure out how to get there. We're going to work on the Doctor's case.
Yeah. Could this UNIT character, could they be an older version of a character from the Thatcher story?
Oh yeah, makes a lot of sense. Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah. Because I think it just seems a bit more dramatically potent to do that, because we've already, like, as a character we've gotten to know maybe a little bit, and care about, and like, yeah, like I think establishing their sacrifice as one that, in retrospect, really wasn't that necessary. That's going to have that nice sort of gut punch that we need for a concept like that to work. But it will be enhanced if it's a character we've already seen, and will link in terms of character, but also maybe even theme to the Thatcher episode. So that's cool. Do you want to? Is there other stuff we want to deal with in this two-parter, or
I think that's plenty. Like, again,
Hmm.
like episode 9 would probably be like carrying on from episode 8, where it's like the Gemma and
Hmm.
Michelle are on bad terms with the Doctor.
Yeah.
But they still have to help out with the alien invasion. It's stuff that's getting in the way. Unit gets involved, and
Yeah.
Unit can maybe Kate Stewart's there, and Kate can do a whole hey guys, like, you're kind of being harsh, and then they go, no, we're not, and Kate can maybe give some big speech like the Brigadier often would. Like I said, episode 9 would just be like a standard invasion story, but like with all this other like character drama stuff happening in the background and stuff to make it slightly different.
I have an idea.
Yeah,
I'm not quite sure how this will work. How old is Kate Stewart meant to be?
I have no idea.
Because
Let me see. Kate Stewart is. She was born 3 years into the Brigadier's marriage. I think it's probably going to be easy to figure out how old Gemma Redgrave is. She is 60 this year. 60? God damn.
Okay.
That's impressive. Doesn't look 60. Well done. What's your idea?
Yeah, I don't know. That maybe the person that the younger person they meet in the Thatcher story is a young Kate Stewart, and then she has to make the sacrifice play, and that would be
I don't think that works. I don't think that works.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fine. We can figure it out.
If we ever decide that Kate Stewart makes a sacrifice play in this, I want the episode to be about her and be about you.
Yeah,
I don't want it muddied up with other stuff. I want the focus to be on her.
Yeah, that's fair. All right, that's okay. We can find somebody else, or like create our own character or whatnot.
Yeah, creating a character is fine.
Yep. Okay. Do you want to go back and maybe try and sort out some of the questions we haven't answered for the previous episodes, or how do you feel?
I think that certainly the TARDIS being stuck going forward, I don't think that really plays a factor.
Yeah, you can scrap that. That's fine. That being said, do we want the Valiard doing something fucky with the TARDIS, or just
the
with...
Valiard is definitely at various points like controlling where the TARDIS goes. So,
okay.
Yeah, that's definitely a thing the Valiard is doing.
Sure. So yeah, that could be the reason why they go from, instead of 1879, it's 1979 and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't have to be like, oh, the TARDIS goes where it wants to go, but I do like the idea of the Valiard interfering like that throughout.
Yeah, having like the Valiard sort of being almost like a puppeteer of the whole season.
Yeah, exactly.
As to how ambiguous we want to be with that idea, it may vary, but still, I do. Yeah, I really like that idea. So no, we're stuck going, forwards in time. That's fine. Are there any other big sort of season ideas that we need to clean
We
up before
haven't
looking.
quite nailed on the Autons as the villain for the Thatcher.
Yes, yeah, I was
story.
going to say that was the other bit that we have to deal with.
I think that's the only, apart from episode titles, I think that's the only thing that we haven't figured out yet.
I don't think, because I'm just trying to think of the various monsters that showed up during the 70s of Doctor Who, especially like particularly the ones that were confronted by Unit. I am fairly certain. I think the last. I've got a feeling that the last Unit episode might heavily featured Unit in in the classic era. Sorry, no, not in the classic era, but during the 70s. Was Terror of the Zygons. I think because the fourth Doctor got called in to help them, and the Doctor, I think in the end said, "This is getting really old hat now. Can you please sort of just sort it out yourselves?" And after he saved the day, of course.
Yeah.
But from memory, that's how it goes. So
I'm gonna look up some 70s Doctor Who monsters and let's see if anything.
Yeah, I tried. I didn't come up with. I didn't have many lists about the 70s specifically, but
so let's see.
The only ones that come to mind that could work are the spiders from Metebelis 3 for some reason.
Okay.
Or the Sontarans.
Uh-huh.
And I think the Sontarans would be cool to bring back just on principle, but the problem is I think they're surprisingly thematically heavy.
They don't
because
story,
no, I don't think so. Because they're like that whole warrior race thing and the honor aspect, like that's its own thing, right? And we've got other themes that we've got to deal with this story. We need something that maybe connects with the story a bit better.
Rootins? Because again, if we're making this like
that's
full on 70s like camp throwback thing.
That's actually a pretty decent idea, and it could also
hang on, sorry, what was Margaret Thatcher's view on, do you know what her views on climate were? Like obviously climate change wasn't a huge thing back then, but do you remember any environmental views?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't. Well, I mean, like, I don't think she was terribly worried about it.
Okay.
I think she was more. If she was confronted on it, she probably said she would have been a bit of a climate skeptic, from what I know. But it wasn't one of her main issues. No, she was more concerned with supporting apartheid and things like that. So.
Sure, because I found this monster called the Crinoids, which are like space weeds.
Oh, the Crinoids, yeah, from the Seeds of Doom. Yeah.
I'm just going to do like this. I found a thing on like 8 classic Doctor Who monsters who should make a return. Hemivores, but we've kind of already did that last season with the vampire thing.
Yeah.
What about the Axons?
I thought of the Axons. Because it's been a while since I've seen that story, but they basically showed up as a, hey, Earthlings, let's be friends. Here's our impressive technology. It'll help grow your food and help us. We're running out of energy. And the Doctor figures out, oh, there's something going on here. And then they reveal themselves to be this, these sort of hideous-looking aliens, because they've got, like, sort of slim and, I don't know, by Earth, from what we'd say on Earth, like a beautiful outer form and whatnot. They could work, but I'm not sure if they thematically could do it. I do actually like the idea of the Rootins, though, because the Rootins, we know that they have sort of like cloning abilities, like they can pretend to be other. Actually, no, sorry, I think I'm confusing it. I really should know this. Can you remember when we looked at Horror of Fang Rock? Was it like that they turned into other humans, or they just mind controlled them? Because I
think they mind controlled. I don't think they
have
any different qualities.
Yeah. Either way, like they can influence other people, and they can infiltrate society. Is what I'm saying. And so maybe there could be members. maybe Margaret Thatcher's cabinet that are being controlled by the Rootons, because they see that Thatcher is, a major world player.
At the very least, I like the idea that if we do the Rootons here, it means in the future we have license to show the Sontarans and Rooton War that has been teased a bunch of times that we haven't actually gotten to see yet.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, I think that sounds neat.
I don't think there's much else that we really need to figure out in terms of stories. I guess we could figure out what the specific alien thing is in episode 9 that they're trying to deal with. Like, is there anything? Is it anything more interesting than just a blanket invasion, or do we want to come up with something a bit more unique?
I think if you're going to do like an invasion thing, I wouldn't make that threat too generic. I think
I agree.
You'd want to have like a monster, even if it's an original one. You want it to have a little bit of personality, right? Because even the Rachnos, as wacky as that design is, at least it's a wacky design people remember, right?
Yeah.
So maybe instead of an invasion, it could be like a cataclysmic event. It could be either maybe like a meteor shower or something, or a burst of solar radiation that gets too close to Earth, or maybe even the threat that the Doctor had to deal with in the Dalek episode. Maybe there's some terrible fissure or breakup in the time vortex that the Doctor somehow knows is coming to Earth. Either way, I think cataclysm over invasion will work better. It'll also give us a chance.
I think somewhere in the middle. I think that I liken this to the Toymaker's invasion of Earth in the Giggle, in that like it was something he was doing something that was causing something weird to happen on Earth, but it wasn't like the spaceships are going to land and we're going to conquer everyone kind of thing.
Yeah, it was a little bit more subtle than that.
Yeah,
which is funny when you think about it, because there were people running around setting things on fire. So,
well, yes.
Anyway, but yes, I see what you mean. So maybe have.
I'm going to do something interesting. I'm going to look back over our previous stories. I'm going to see if we introduced any monsters in the past that we think we could bring back here.
Cool.
Let's see. We do a lot of shit with rifts.
Yeah, the rift treaders. We did a fair bit with them.
Rift treaders don't work here, but even just rifts in general. We have Zygons popping up. I forgot we did this. The Zygon incursion and the Zygon diversion. That's a very fun one.
Yeah.
Like continuing that theme, we did do Cybermen at some point. I forgot about that.
Yeah. Cyberspace.
Yep, we did. Humans are the ones that are invading. That one was fun. I forgot we did Krampus.
Oh yeah.
It's fun to look back over these.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. This is our only villain that we've introduced that isn't like hard and fast, like set on like a specific. Because Rift Treaders are pretty much exclusively Astropolis now, and they've basically been dealt with. They're not villains anymore. They're allies.
I agree. Yeah, I don't think we need.
We do have the Phasmos or Phasmos as an entity, and that's the monster from Return to Fang Rock, the ones that can only be seen in photographs.
Yeah.
And we had that as like a horror thing last time.
Yeah.
Could it be a technology thing this time?
I think so. Because especially now, we're living in a very visual age where people are, taking selfies. I mean, God, I don't want to sound like a boomer, but you know what I mean. Like, God, all those kids on their phones taking the selfies and but we are we're living in a very technologically advanced visual time. So it'd be interesting, because if this weird phenomena starts happening with photos, a lot of people are going to notice it. And then we can have things like people saying, oh, it's a hoax, it's a conspiracy, but then people realize, oh, this is actually really weird. Hey, Dad, why is there a creepy looking phantom thing standing next to Grandma at a photo of my 17th birthday. Can you help me there, please? So things like
Well,
that. And
remember these things don't travel through photographs or technology. They can only be seen.
yeah, well, I mean that they're
So if
yeah,
you see
like
a
but they're
phasmos
showing up.
behind if you see a phasmos behind your grandmother, it's gonna kill her.
Oh yeah, yeah. But they're showing up nonetheless. People are taking notice. They're seeing sort of these visions in photos. I mean, yeah, does that work?
I'm trying to work out how this what's their invasion plan if they're being spotted more and more, or is it just that they're being spotted more and more, so they're going to panic and attack, and we need to like figure out a way to either like calm them down, or maybe hey let's just chat. You don't want to be you're having an issue with like humanity basically like lashing out at you after being scared by them. Cool, let's take you somewhere else. Let's find you a new home, and like something like that. Maybe the Phasmos can be like, hey, no can do. We've been here. Oh, that's just the silence again. Oh,
yeah,
that's just the silence again. And we literally just did the silence.
We did in
we
a
can't
silence
do that
episode.
again. Oh no. Okay. Fuck. Okay, I love the concept of the Phasmos, but I want to revisit them later. I don't think they make sense here anymore. Just because, like,
we've already got the
silence.
Okay, that's fine.
In that case, let's come up with something new.
Yeah, alright, sure. Ooh. So do you want them to be like an alien species, or
I think I like the idea of them being like this kind of like a scouting party for like a maybe there's an alien species that they're looking for like they're doing the Star Trek thing where it's like we're seeking out new life, but it's also more of like a hey, we're looking to colonize. We're looking to colonize new planets. Our home planet's fine, but we're just looking for a home. Oh, we've landed here, and these guys are clearly like completely like technologically backwards compared to us. Therefore, they are nothing. Let's just scout this planet out, and we'll decide if we want to take it as our own to colonize here.
Yeah,
and that can be a hey, don't do that. You'll start a war.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that can work. Do we have a name for this species? Well, I mean, do we just want to come up with something weird and hokey as, Doctor Who
we can just
often
name
does?
them after the planet they live on. Let's call them the
Vexons or something. I don't know.
The Vexons. Done.
Sure. Yeah. So they're here as like not a horrible invasion. We're going to destroy everything, but as we're so above you, you're like ants. So if we scrub the planet, it's not going to matter.
Or even more like, hey, we're going to move in. There's literally nothing you can do to stop us.
That sounds like a very human thing to do.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, cool. Now that works.
And we can have this, like, hey, unit can be like, Doctor, if they try to do this, we will fire back because, like, obviously.
Yeah, because why wouldn't they?
And the Doctor can be being like, don't do that. I'll try and figure out a peaceful option. And maybe Michelle being like, and Michelle can be, oh, that'll be a change. Or something like that. Maybe not that overt, but like Michelle can make a snide remark about, oh, okay. So now you're interfering. Cool story. These guys can give us technology that can help us out.
Yeah.
And you want to send them away.
I kind of love how much
Why
of a
do you speak for us?
Yeah, I love how much of a contrarian Michelle is becoming here. I don't mean that in a making fun way, but it's
certainly. Well, I think especially after all they've been through, and I think it's a very like she's obviously not a teenager, but it's a very teenage thing to do. Where it's like if you disagree, if you've had an argument with someone about literally anything, and you're still like seething about it, you are naturally going to be the contrarian to anything that they say, just even unintentionally. Like these things
Yeah.
might not even be things that Michelle necessarily agrees with. The fact that she's saying these things, but
Yeah.
it's just
But
so like
the resentment has been growing.
there's such resentment there. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Yeah, cool. That sounds really interesting. And so, I mean, it is sort of like we've seen setups like this before, with the Doctor sort of being peacekeeper, and but I think it's a tried and true enough formula that we can
Yeah.
still do stuff with it.
And it's also like a solid enough story that it means that because the framework is so familiar, it allows us to do these other things with the story that we want to do to set up the finale. These things like let's you know let's bring these tensions to a head. Let's have the Doctor be questioned. Let's have the sacrifice play be a big, hey, we're intentionally doing something similar to point out that the Doctor could be doing better.
Yep. Cool. No, I think that works.
Me too.
Yep. Nice.
And with that, I think all we need to do is name these episodes, which has consistently been the hardest part of this job.
Are you ready to stay up for another hour, Cuff? Because I might be.
Oh boy. Can you look up some of Margaret Thatcher's well-known phrases or idioms to name episode 3?
I know a couple. That like stuff like there are no there is no society. There are only families and individuals who live within that society, and that phrase was kind of touted against her. So, God, what else did she say? Where we find discord, where may we bring a harmony. I think she was quoting a prayer from Saint Francis or something. The lady's not for turning. That's probably one of her most famous. God, what else? I am gonna look some of this up.
Okay, how do you feel about the Beast of Olympus for episode 2?
Yeah, that's nice.
Okay. I might quickly message Sam to see if she has any title thoughts for hers. Okay. How about for the finale, just calling it the Executioner to reference Judge, Jury, and Executioner, which is kind of what the Valeyard is.
Yeah, I like that. Here's an interesting one. I'm just looking up. I'm on brainyquote.com. But there's something here. Margaret Thatcher, and this sounds like a very Thatcher thing to say. She once said, "Pennies do not come from heaven; they have to be earned here on Earth." And maybe the title can be "Pennies from Heaven."
From heaven, yeah, that works.
Yeah. Sorry, just remind me again. What was the monster we decided for?
The Rutans.
The Rutans. Yes. Okay. Cool. Her other really famous quote is, "If you want something said, ask a man. If you want something done, ask a woman." That quote actually kind of really pisses me off because she wasn't a feminist. She said so herself. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Alliance of the Daleks.
Yeah. I like that. I fear it gives away the premise too quickly, but then again, so do most of the other of the Dalek stories.
Well, also that being the premise isn't really the twist of the story, so it's not. But also, did end up becoming more of a Davros thing than a Dalek thing. So I
Yeah.
don't know how I feel about that overall.
Mm.
Either way,
Um. Yeah. Okay. Well, if the idea is that they've kidnapped the Doctor, could it be like prisoner of the Daleks? I mean, I know that's a bit similar to
I
prisoner
don't know
of the
about that.
Jadoon, but
How, I just had a thought for the silence episode, and I quite like this as a
well,
How about just calling it quiet? Because that doesn't give away the silencer in it, especially if the spaceship they're
yeah,
on is quite silent itself.
yeah,
And then when you get to the end of the story, it's like, holy shit, it was there the whole time.
yeah. I like that. That's cool. Sort of similar to your episode idea, cyberspace.
Yeah, kind of. Um, Sam responded that her title should be something to do with legacy. I'm gonna just respond, probably not something as basic as legacy of the Doctor, right?
Mm. Legend of the Doctor, or does that title already exist in an episode?
I'm sure it does, but that suggests something more grand than we'll be presenting.
That's true. Tales of the Doctor.
Tales of the TARDIS is already a thing.
True.
What else have we got to name? We've got to name the serial killer episode, the Dalek story, and part 1 of the finale.
Mm-hmm. For this serial killer episode, I just thought maybe something like The Missing, but I actually think even for a darker episode of Doctor Who, that's a bit too ominous. So,
Well, considering what the subject matter is, I don't hate that.
The Vanishing Colony.
The Vanishing Colony, I quite like. Yeah,
That could work. It's
good
a bit
enough.
weird, maybe a bit more ambiguous, but still kind of catchy.
Yeah, that's good enough. I don't mind it. All right, Thatcher, Daleks, and part 1. We're doing better than this than we normally do.
By the way, you know what's really sad? When the biggest problem we had with the last one was we struggled for so long coming up with a name for the Silurian story. And
Yeah,
I
we did.
think
Yeah,
like a day after we did the recording, I think I came up with an idea. The Earthlings.
the Earthlings. Well, we landed on the Anthropocenes.
But I thought the Earthlings was like kind of better because it's cleaner, simpler, and it's because I think the big debate was like, okay, we want to say it's the Silurians planet, but it's the humans planet as well. But like the name the Earthlings sort of implies that.
Yeah, I just changed it. I like that better.
Okay, fair enough.
Sam suggested Legacy of Evil, which I think is pretty cool because it's like playing up the misunderstood history angle of the whole thing.
Actually, I should mention, I don't think this will matter too much because I think there's enough differences between episodes, but there is a story, the Fourth Doctor story, The Face of Evil, which is Leela's introduction story.
There are so many similar sounding titles that it doesn't really matter.
Oh no, I mean conceptually, because in that story, the Doctor shows up, and the people of this planet think that the Doctor is like an evil god that they fear, and it turns out to be like a rogue AI that devolves into like personality disintegration because they don't know who they are, and they have like pictures of the Doctor's face on screens, and there's like a monument made out of rock with the Doctor's face on it, which is why it's called the Face of Evil. So sort of similar, but I think there's enough differences in these episodes.
There's enough.
Yeah.
And we can that's close enough as well that we can even do a thing where it's like throughout the episode that I'll be like, well, this isn't the first time this has happened to me.
Cool. I'm really liking actually how well the themes have been developing.
Yeah, I quite like it a lot.
Yeah.
Alright, so we just need to name the Dalek story and part 1 of the finale, and then we're done.
Okay.
Okay.
Dalek story. So why do I said Prisoner of the Daleks? Why was that not a good idea again?
Because that's not really what the episode is
Oh
about.
yeah, because it's not really. Savior of the Daleks? I mean, I know that's. I just think because that's like part of the goal of the story because they're trying to stop the Daleks from being erased from history.
I don't hate it if if Hadley's episode wasn't called "The Savior from the Midnight Obelisk."
Oof, yeah.
Unfortunately, Hadley has, for the second time in this recording session, stolen someone else's idea before they had it.
Oh dear. Yeah. Survival of the Daleks?
Defender of Skaro.
Ooh. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, I actually really like that a lot. Or, I mean, we could do Defender of the Daleks, but no, I think probably Skaro's better because it's not like...
Because again, it's not really about the Daleks. It is,
yeah,
but
it's still Dalek-oriented, the title.
Yeah, and we can also play up a thing where it's like, this title could refer to either Davros or, in this instance now, the Doctor.
Yes. Cool, yeah, okay, Defender of Skaro, I like that. Yeah.
One to go.
Is it the part
1, yeah.
Part 1, yeah.
What if we call it the Jury?
I was going to say the Judge, but yes, the Jury could work as well.
That kind of is what this is. It's like, this episode 9 is kind of like the last piece of evidence the Valeyard is presenting in this trial, kind of. Like, in their own mind, anyway, that's what it is.
Yeah.
One thing I forgot to ask, and it kind of is important. By the end of episode 10, where are we? Like, are both companions sticking around? Is only one companion sticking around? Do both of them leave? Like, they've reconciled their differences, but they have, obviously there's quite a lot of baggage there. Do they decide, hey, we're wiping the slate clean now that we're seeing more eye to eye, let's just go out and have some fun? Or are we saying, look, thanks for the journey, I think this is where we part ways?
I think more the second option, to be a bit, to be pretty thematically consistent. But I think these are characters, once sort of the wounds have healed, they could show up again as one-off characters in future episodes.
Okay.
Like, maybe not like too many, but one where they both show up in the same episode, and maybe there could be, again, some healing that has occurred. Because this is actually a pretty heavy season, when you think about it. But I think, yeah, ending on a slightly bittersweet note.
They part ways on good terms, then.
Yeah. Yeah. If not on, amazing, hey, Doctor, where's our next adventure going to take us sort of terms? Yeah, I agree.
Okay, so we once again leave Phoebe Waller-Bridge's Doctor alone.
Yeah.
Sweet. That means I finally get to introduce companions again. I was about to say finally, but I was the one that introduced the Grants the first time around. But no, cool. And also that means I get to wipe the slate clean to introduce my story arc, kind of involving the Silence for next season, because, spoiler alert, I have no idea what that's going to be yet. I just had this idea about the Silence story, and then when I had it, I went, well, this doesn't really make sense because the Silence are so ingrained in this part of the Doctor's timeline. I guess the only way to do this story and have it make sense is to set up something else with them, so I guess they're going to be important later.
Yeah. Cool.
I like this season a lot. I think this is really fun.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of interesting...
really great ideas in here, a lot of great themes, a lot of great one-offs.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of strange, interesting stuff, but it comes together. Yeah. And I know, like, we've come back to this word over and over, but, like, thematically, I think it's very, very interesting. Very rich, indeed. And I think we've managed to have a through line throughout the whole season. I mean, plot-wise, it still works. It still threads it all together.
I agree, yeah.
Yeah. In terms of
Um,
the Thatcher episode, sorry, just briefly with
yeah,
Pennies from Heaven, do you think that works for a story title? I mean, beyond it being a Thatcher quote, I mean, would it?
it does. I think it does.
Hmm.
It's.
Hmm.
I, at the very least, I like the idea too much of making it making the title a Thatcher quote. I
Yeah,
like that idea
sure.
too much to change it now.
Yeah, that's fair. And I think it's like it's a slight paraphrase of what she said, but like it still works. Pennies from Heaven has got a weird kind of
There's something strangely
ambiguous.
science fiction about it.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think that's
Incredible. We have
nice.
once again outshone several actual Doctor Who writers in our ideas, and I'm not being uh this isn't I'm not bragging. I'm not being like arrogant when I say that. I genuinely think a lot of these ideas are better than what's been done in the show in the past. We're asking the
Uh,
hard questions.
I'm
Can
not.
there be
I don't.
3 women and no men on the TARDIS without anyone causing a fuss?
Yeah, no boys allowed. No,
Surely
seriously.
this season would get rave reviews as soon as the cast comes out, right?
Yeah, that'd be.
3 women? This is the most woke season yet. There can be nothing good about this.
Hmm. Um. Yeah, I mean, in terms of it being better than previous writers, despite my reservations of all those writers, I'll hold off my judgments on that. But fair enough. Fair enough. I at the very least think that we've got some really great ideas here. So yeah, another one done and dusted.
Indeed. So, next time on the show, we will be looking at the upcoming season of the show, Doctor Who, which we review
Mm.
sometimes. It is tantalizingly close right now, and there's a lot to
Yeah.
discuss, and we'll be doing our regular predictions as well.
Yep.
This is going to
Oh
be fun.
yeah, the prediction game. Yeah, that's going to be very, very, very interesting. And it's 5 predictions each. Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Okay. Yep. Cool. Yeah, that'll be fun. Um, nice. I've watched both trailers, but I'm gonna watch them both again in preparation. So
Yeah, I will too. I only realized in this moment that I need to do predictions, and for you, the audience, we are recording this episode tomorrow from our perspective. So we got to come up
yep.
with
So do I. I've got to figure them out too. Oh my god. Cool.
But until then, I'm Alex,
I'm Fitz.
and see you in season 4. The BBC haven't sacked us yet.
See you later.